The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversation as 200 cadets from across the galaxy settled into their seats. Alex Murphy pulled out his data pad and glanced around the massive classroom. Row after row of different species filled the tiered seating: tall, elegant centauri with their silver skin, bulky draconian warriors with their scaled hides, and dozens of other alien races. As one of only 30 humans at the Galactic Naval Academy, Alex always felt a bit out of place. He slumped into seat 43A, the same spot he had claimed on the first day of class 6 months ago. His friend Lisa Grant waved from 2 rows ahead. She was everything Alex was not: confident, outgoing, and near the top of their class. Alex managed a weak smile back before opening his notes on interspecies warfare doctrine. Professor Veltar entered the room with his usual dramatic flair. The ancient Centauri had been teaching military history for over a century, and his silver beard reached nearly to his knees. His voice carried easily across the vast hall without any amplification. Today we examine the Third Rigel conflict, Professor Veltar began, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display that materialized above the podium. Notice how the human forces adapted their tactics after the initial defeat at Rigel Prime. Alex took notes dutifully, though military. History had never been his strongest subject. He was here because his aptitude tests showed promise in logistics and supply chain management. Not exactly glamorous, but every fleet needed people who could make sure the right supplies reached the right places. A few seats over, Cadet Zefkol sat straight and proud. The Draconian noble was easily the best student in their year, and he never let anyone forget it. His golden scales gleamed under the classroom lights as he asked pointed questions about battle formations and strategic decisions. The humans showed remarkable adaptability, Professor Veltar continued. They transformed a crushing defeat into a strategic advantage by changing their entire approach to space combat. Alex was copying down notes about supply routes when the air in front of the professor's podium began to shimmer. A low hum filled the room, and every cadet looked up from their work. Emergency hologram protocols rarely activated during class time. The shimmer solidified into the imposing figure of Admiral Marcus Kane, his Terran Defense Force uniform crisp and formal. Even as a projection, his presence commanded immediate attention. The classroom fell completely silent. "I apologize for the interruption, Professor Veltar," Admiral Kane said with a slight nod. "I need to address one of your cadets immediately." "Professor," Veltar's ancient eyes widened. In all his years of teaching, he had never seen a field-grade officer interrupt active classes. "Of course, Admiral. How can we assist?" Admiral Kane's gaze swept across the rows of cadets before settling on a specific location. "Cadet Alex Murphy, please stand." Alex felt his blood turn to ice. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward him, representing dozens of different species. He remained frozen in his seat, certain he had misheard. There had to be another Alex Murphy, somewhere in the academy. "Cadet Murphy," Admiral Kane repeated, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Seat 43A. There was no mistake. Alex's legs felt weak as he slowly stood up. Whispers began to ripple through the classroom, in various languages. Lisa Grant turned in her seat, her face full of concern and confusion. "Cadet Murphy," Admiral Kane continued, "by the authority vested in me by the Galactic Defense Council and the Terran Defense Force, you are hereby promoted to the rank of lieutenant and awarded the Stellar Cross for exceptional valor." The whispers stopped. The silence that followed was so complete that Alex could hear his own heartbeat. The Stellar Cross was the highest military honor in known space, awarded only for actions that saved countless lives at great personal risk. Professor Veltar had mentioned in previous lectures that fewer than 50 beings in galactic history had received it. Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had never seen combat. His entire military experience consisted of academy training exercises and classroom theory. There had to be some terrible mistake. Admiral Kane continued as if Alex's confusion was perfectly normal. "Your actions during Operation Silent Shield prevented a catastrophe that would have cost millions of lives. Your courage and sacrifice exemplify the finest traditions of military service. The Admiral's image raised his hand and a small drone materialized in the classroom, hovering toward Alex's position. Attached to the drone was a small case containing what could only be the actual metal. "The ceremony will be brief," Admiral Kane said. "Please step forward to receive your commendation." Alex looked around desperately. Surely someone would point out the obvious error. He caught Lisa's eye, and she looked as bewildered as he felt. Professor Veltar stood with his mouth slightly open, his four hands hanging loosely at his sides. "Sir," Alex finally managed to croak out, his voice barely audible. "I think there's been a mistake. I've never been in combat. I don't know what Operation Silent Shield is." Admiral Kane's expression did not change. "Step forward, Lieutenant Murphy." The title hit Alex like a physical blow. Lieutenant Murphy. He was no longer a cadet. Somehow, without his knowledge or memory, he had become a commissioned officer and a decorated war hero. Moving like a person underwater, Alex made his way down the steps to the front of the classroom. Every footstep echoed in the absolute silence. The drone extended the metal case toward him with mechanical precision. Alex took the case with trembling hands. Inside, nestled in purple velvet, lay the stellar cross, a crystalline star that seemed to contain its own inner light. Below it was a citation bearing his name and a date from 8 months ago. According to the document, Lieutenant Alex Murphy had single-handedly neutralized a Class Omega extinction-level threat to galactic civilization. 8 months ago, Alex had been taking his entrance exams for the Academy. "Congratulations, Lieutenant," Admiral Kane said solemnly. "Your service will never be forgotten, even if you cannot remember it yourself." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Alex standing alone at the front of the classroom, holding a medal for a war he could not remember fighting. Behind him, 200 cadets sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet human student in seat 43A, the one who struggled with military history and barely passed his tactical exams, was apparently one of the greatest heroes in galactic history. Professor Veltar was the first to break the silence. His voice was barely a whisper, filled with awe and confusion. "In over a century of teaching," he said slowly, "I have never seen anything like this." Alex stood there, holding the medal, trying to understand how his entire life had just changed in the span of 5 minutes. 24 hours had passed since the medal ceremony, and the Galactic Naval Academy was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Every corridor Alex walked down fell silent when he approached, then erupted in whispered conversations the moment he passed. He had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the stellar cross and trying to remember anything about Operation Silent Shield. Lisa Grant found him in the cafeteria during the morning meal period, sitting alone at a corner table while cadets from other species pointed and whispered. She slammed her breakfast tray down across from him with enough force to make him jump. "Okay, Alex," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "I've been your study partner for 6 months. I've helped you with tactical theory homework. I've listened to you worry about failing Professor Veltar's class. Now you're telling me you're secretly some kind of war hero?" Alex looked up from his untouched food. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his usually neat uniform was wrinkled. "Lisa, I swear I don't remember any of it. 8 months ago I was taking entrance exams. I've never been in space combat. I've never even fired a weapon outside of training simulations." "People don't just forget being war heroes," Lisa shot back. "The Stellar Cross isn't something they hand out by mistake. 50 beings in all of galactic history, Alex. 50. Before Alex could respond, a shadow fell across their table. They looked up to see Cadet Zefkal standing nearby, his golden scales gleaming and his reptilian eyes fixed on Alex. The Draconian's expression was unreadable, which somehow made it more intimidating. "May I sit?" Zefkal asked, though his tone suggested it was not really a request. Lisa gestured to an empty chair, never taking her eyes off the towering alien. Zefkal folded his massive frame into the seat, which creaked under his weight. "I have been thinking about yesterday's events," Zefkal said slowly. "In Draconian culture, military honors are sacred. They are earned through blood and sacrifice. To receive such recognition through deception would be the highest form of dishonor. Alex felt his cheeks burning. I'm not lying. I don't remember. I did not say you were lying, Zefkol interrupted. I said I have been thinking. You humans have a reputation for cleverness, for finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. Perhaps this is another human trick we do not understand. It's not a trick, Alex said firmly. I'm as confused as everyone else. Zefkol studied him for a long moment. Then we must find the truth. My family's honor is partially tied to being the top cadet in our class. If you are truly a decorated officer, then my position becomes complicated. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Captain Elena Rodriguez, the Academy's security chief. She was a compact woman with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that suggested she had seen everything the galaxy had to offer. Lieutenant Murphy, she said, using Alex's new rank, I need you to come with me. Alex stood up immediately, grateful for any excuse to escape the stares of his fellow cadets. Where are we going? Medical wing, Captain Rodriguez replied. We're going to figure out what happened to you. The medical wing of the Academy was a maze of white corridors and advanced equipment from a dozen different worlds. Captain Rodriguez led Alex to a private examination room where a tall, thin man with kind eyes was waiting. Lieutenant Murphy, this is Dr. Simon Clark, our specialist in memory and psychological trauma, Captain Rodriguez said. He's going to run some tests. Dr. Clark gestured for Alex to sit on the examination table. This might seem strange, but we need to understand why you can't remember receiving the galaxy's highest military honor. Memory suppression isn't uncommon in cases of severe psychological trauma. Trauma? Alex asked. But I feel fine. I felt fine until yesterday. That's exactly what we need to investigate, Dr. Clark said, attaching several sensors to Alex's temples. These will monitor your brain activity while I ask you some questions. Just relax and answer as honestly as you can. The next hour was a blur of questions and tests. Dr. Clark showed Alex images of different star systems, asked him about his dreams, and had him perform various memory exercises. The whole time machines beeped and hummed around them. Interesting, Dr. Clark murmured, studying the readouts on his equipment. Captain Rodriguez, you should see this. Captain Rodriguez moved to look at the displays. Her expression grew more serious as she studied the data. What is it? Alex asked, starting to feel genuinely worried. Dr. Clark turned to face him. Alex, your brain patterns show clear evidence of severe psychological trauma, the kind we usually see in combat veterans who have experienced extreme stress. But there's something else. Evidence of professional memory conditioning. Memory conditioning? Alex repeated. What does that mean? It means someone deliberately altered your memories, Captain Rodriguez said grimly. This wasn't natural amnesia or trauma-induced memory loss. Someone with very advanced medical technology specifically blocked your access to certain experiences. Alex felt the room spinning slightly. That's impossible. Why would anyone do that? Before anyone could answer, the door to the examination room slid open. A tall insectoid being entered, moving with the precise grace typical of the Thrix species. His compound eyes glittered as he surveyed the room. Commander Thrix, Captain Rodriguez said, standing straighter. I didn't know you were on station. I arrived an hour ago, Commander Thrix said, his voice carrying the slight buzzing quality common to his species. Galactic Intelligence has taken an interest in Lieutenant Murphy's situation. Dr. Clark, what have you found? Dr. Clark gestured to his equipment. Definitive evidence of memory suppression and combat trauma. Whoever did this had access to the most advanced psychological conditioning techniques in known space. Commander Thrix's antennae twitched slightly, the equivalent of a human nodding. That narrows the field considerably. Very few organizations have that capability. Organizations? Alex asked weakly. The kind that run operations so classified that even the people who carry them out aren't allowed to remember them afterward, Commander Thrix explained. Lieutenant Murphy, I believe, you were part of something far more significant than a simple military mission. Alex looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. Captain Rodriguez's concern, Dr. Clark's scientific curiosity, and Commander Thrix's calculating assessment. Whatever he had forgotten, it was big enough to bring galactic intelligence to a backwater academy. "Can you restore my memories?" Alex asked. Dr. Clark and Commander Thrix exchanged a look that Alex didn't like. "Possibly," Dr. Clark said slowly. "But memory conditioning of this sophistication usually includes safeguards. Breaking through them could be dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "The trauma that caused your original memory loss might come flooding back all at once," Dr. Clark explained. "And there's no way to predict how your mind will handle it." Alex was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the weight of the metal in his pocket and the confused faces of his fellow cadets. "Do it," he said finally. "I need to know what I've forgotten." 3 days after the medal ceremony, Alex lay on a medical table surrounded by the most advanced neural scanning equipment the Academy had ever assembled. Dr. Clark had spent hours preparing for the memory recovery procedure, warning Alex repeatedly about the risks. "Are you ready?" Dr. Clark asked, his hand hovering over the activation controls. Alex nodded, though his mouth was dry with fear. Captain Rodriguez and Commander Thrix watched from behind a protective barrier, their faces tense with anticipation. The machine hummed to life, and Alex felt a strange tingling sensation spread through his skull. At first, nothing happened. Then, like water breaking through a cracked dam, the memories came flooding back. He was no longer Alex Murphy, confused Academy cadet. He was Lieutenant Alex Murphy, member of Project Lazarus, the most classified military unit in human space. The first memory hit him like a physical blow. He was standing in a briefing room aboard a ship he didn't recognize, surrounded by 12 other humans in unmarked black uniforms. The commanding officer was a woman with steel gray hair and scars across her left cheek. "Gentlemen and ladies," she was saying, "what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. For the past 6 months, our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive movement in the void sectors." Alex remembered the chill that ran down his spine at those words. The void sectors were the dark regions between star systems where nothing was supposed to live. Every galactic civilization had legends about things that dwelt in the empty spaces between stars. But they were just stories. Ancient myths. Warnings from primitive times. "The void swarm is real," the commander continued. "And they're mobilizing for the largest assault in galactic history." The memories came faster now, overwhelming Alex's consciousness. He saw himself training for months in zero-gravity combat, learning to fight in environments where normal physics didn't apply. He remembered studying alien biology texts that made his stomach turn, learning about creatures that existed partially outside normal space-time. The void swarm, he learned, were not just another hostile alien species. They were something far worse, ancient predators that had existed since before the first galactic civilizations. They fed on the life force of entire worlds, consuming not just the inhabitants, but the very essence of life itself. When they were finished with a planet, nothing remained but a cold, dead rock drifting in space. Alex remembered the growing horror as intelligence reports revealed the scope of the swarm's plan. They intended to strike simultaneously at every major inhabited system in the galaxy. Dozens of worlds would fall in the first wave, including Earth, the Centauri homeworld, and the Draconian Empire's capital. "Our mission is simple," the commander had explained during their final briefing. "Infiltrate the swarm's staging area in deep space and find a way to disrupt their coordination. Without their hive mind network, they're just individual predators. Dangerous, but manageable." The next memory was of their ship, a prototype stealth vessel, sliding silently through the absolute darkness of the void sectors. Alex remembered, the crew growing increasingly tense as they approached their target, a massive structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions human science couldn't fully understand. Then came the memory Alex had been dreading. The mission had gone wrong almost immediately. The void swarm had detected their approach and swarmed the ship. Alex watched his teammates die one by one as creatures of living shadow tore through their defenses. Within minutes, He was the only survivor, trapped in a dying ship while thousands of swarm entities circled like sharks. But Alex hadn't given up. He remembered making a desperate decision that still made his hands shake. Using the ship's experimental quantum drive, he had deliberately crashed into the swarm's central hive mind nexus, a structure the size of a small moon that coordinated their entire species. The impact had thrown him into the heart of the swarm's collective consciousness. For what felt like hours but must have been only minutes, Alex existed as a ghost in the machine, his human mind interfacing directly with an alien intelligence older than most stars. The swarm's thoughts were like ice water in his brain, cold, calculating, and utterly without compassion. They saw the galaxy's living worlds as nothing more than food to be harvested. Billions of beings were just numbers to them, resources to be consumed. But Alex had brought something with him into their network, a quantum virus designed by Earth's best computer scientists. It was specifically crafted to exploit the weaknesses in hive mind structures, turning their greatest strength into a fatal vulnerability. As the virus spread through the swarm's collective consciousness, Alex experienced their confusion and growing panic. For the first time in eons, the Void Swarm felt fear. Their perfect coordination began to break down as sections of the hive mind turned against each other. The last memory was the most painful. Alex remembered floating in the wreckage of the Nexus, his life support failing, watching as the swarm fleet tore itself apart in confused, desperate battles. He had succeeded, but the cost was everything. His team was dead, his ship destroyed, and he was dying alone in the cold emptiness between stars. Then darkness. Nothing. Alex opened his eyes on the medical table, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Clark was leaning over him, checking his vital signs with obvious concern. "Alex, can you hear me? How do you feel?" Alex tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak. "My team, they're all dead." Captain Rodriguez moved closer to the table. "Who's dead, Alex? What team?" "Project Lazarus," Alex whispered. 12 of us went in. I'm the only one who came back." Commander Thrix's compound eyes widened. Even his alien features couldn't hide his shock. "Project Lazarus is just a rumor. A ghost story intelligence agents tell each other." "No," Alex said, struggling to sit up. "It was real. We stopped the Void Swarm from destroying the galaxy, but everyone else died doing it." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Clark was the first to speak, his voice filled with awe. "Alex, if what you're remembering is true, then you single-handedly prevented the extinction of every sentient species in known space." "The memories feel real," Alex said, wiping his eyes. "But how did I end up at the Academy? How did I get a new identity?" Commander Thrix answered that question. "Memory conditioning and identity reconstruction. The Terran Defense Force probably decided you deserved a normal life after what you sacrificed. They gave you a new background and placed you somewhere safe. But why reveal it now?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Why interrupt a classroom to give him the medal?" Alex closed his eyes, trying to access more of his recovered memories. Something was nagging at him, a detail he had missed. Then it hit him like a cold fist in his stomach. "Because it's not over," he said quietly. "The main swarm fleet was destroyed, but the virus I used, it wasn't perfect. Some of them survived." He looked up at the three faces staring down at him. "The Void Swarm is coming back, and I'm the only person alive who knows how they think." 1 week after Alex's memories returned, the Galactic Naval Academy had transformed into the center of the biggest political crisis in centuries. Representatives from every major species had arrived on Epsilon Station, demanding answers about humanity's secret war and what other operations they might be hiding. Alex sat in a conference room that had been hastily converted into a secure briefing area, surrounded by beings he had only read about in textbooks. The Centauri High Chancellor, an elegant woman with silver skin and 4 graceful arms, sat across from him. Next to her was General Korath, the Draconian Empire's supreme military commander, whose black scales and battle scars made him look like something from a nightmare. "Let me understand this correctly," the Chancellor said, her voice like crystal chimes. Humanity discovered an extinction-level threat to the entire galaxy and decided to handle it alone, without informing the Galactic Council? Admiral Kane, who had arrived the day before, answered before Alex could speak. The threat was immediate. We had weeks, not months. By the time we could have convinced the Council to act, billions would have been dead. General Korath leaned forward, his massive claws scraping against the table. You expect us to believe that one human cadet destroyed a force capable of ending galactic civilization? The Draconians have fought the fiercest battles in known space, and we have never heard of anything like this void swarm. Alex found his voice. That was the point, General. The swarm operated in the spaces between systems, in the dark areas where no one goes. They've been planning this attack for centuries, maybe longer. Convenient, muttered Ambassador Cleet, the insectoid, representative from the hive worlds. A secret enemy that no one has ever seen, defeated by a secret mission that no one can verify. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Alex could see the doubt in their alien faces, the suspicion that humanity was playing some elaborate political game. He didn't blame them. The story sounded impossible even to him, and he had lived through it. Dr. Clark, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. If I may, I have some evidence that might help. He activated a holographic display that showed brain scan images. These are Lieutenant Murphy's neural patterns from our memory recovery session. The trauma indicators are unlike anything in our medical databases. The stress patterns suggest exposure to genuinely alien thought processes, something that would only be possible through direct contact with a non-terrestrial collective intelligence. Brain scans can be faked, General Korath growled. Not these patterns, Dr. Clark replied confidently. The neural scarring shows evidence of quantum-level interference with human consciousness. We don't have the technology to simulate that kind of damage. Ambassador Zextai from the Crystalline Consortium spoke up, her voice creating harmonic overtones that filled the room. Even if we accept that this void swarm existed and was defeated, why should we trust humanity now? What other secrets are you hiding? Admiral Kane's jaw tightened. We're hiding nothing. Project Lazarus was disbanded after the mission. The surviving records have been turned over to Galactic Intelligence. The surviving records of a Black Ops program, Chancellor Alara noted dryly. How convenient that most of the evidence was destroyed. Alex felt frustration building in his chest. These beings were arguing about politics while the real threat was still out there. The evidence isn't destroyed, he said loudly, cutting through the diplomatic chatter. It's in my head. The room fell silent. Alex stood up slowly, feeling the weight of a dozen alien gazes. You want proof? I can tell you exactly how the swarm thinks. I can describe their ship designs, their attack patterns, their weaknesses. I spent subjective hours inside their collective consciousness. I know them better than any being in this galaxy. He looked directly at General Korath. The swarm doesn't use energy weapons like we do. They consume life force directly, turning their victims into more swarm entities. A draconian warriors. Strength becomes meaningless when the enemy can drain the life from your body before you can close to combat range. The general's expression shifted slightly, showing the first hint of genuine concern. Alex continued, addressing the room. The Centauri's advanced energy shields are useless against them because they don't attack matter. They attack the quantum patterns that define life itself. And the hive world's collective intelligence would actually make them more vulnerable, because the swarm specializes in corrupting and controlling hive minds. The room was completely quiet now. Alex had their attention. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? Alex asked, echoing the thoughts that had been forming in his mind all week. It's not our technology or our weapons. It's that when everything looks hopeless, when the smart choice is to run or surrender, we have this annoying habit of saying, not today, and finding a way to win. Commander Thrix, who had been observing from the corner, stepped forward. Lieutenant Murphy, you mentioned that some of the swarm survived. What can you tell us about this ongoing threat? Alex felt his blood chill as he accessed those particular memories. The main fleet was destroyed when they turned on each other, but the virus I used wasn't perfect. Small groups of swarm entities scattered to the outer regions of the galaxy. They're out there, regrouping and adapting. How long before they can mount another attack? Admiral Kane asked. I don't know for certain, Alex admitted. But they learn from their failures. The next attack will be different. Probably targeted strikes instead of a massive frontal assault. They'll try to take out our communication networks first, then hit isolated colonies where no one can call for help. Chancellor Alara leaned back in her chair, her forearms folded in thought. If what you're saying is true, then we need to completely restructure our defense strategies. More than that, Alex said grimly, we need to prepare for an enemy that can turn our strengths against us. Traditional military thinking won't work against them. General Korath surprised everyone by speaking up in a thoughtful tone. What do you recommend? Alex had been thinking about this question for days. Small independent units trained in irregular warfare. Teams that can operate without central command, because the swarm's first target will always be our command structure. We need people who can think creatively under pressure. Like humans, Ambassador Cleet observed, though his tone was less hostile than before. Like anyone willing to learn, Alex corrected. The swarm's biggest advantage is that they think in patterns. They expect us to behave like a typical galactic civilization, centralized, predictable, dependent on technology and hierarchy. We need to become something they can't predict. The meeting continued for several more hours, but Alex could sense the shift in the room's atmosphere. The representatives were no longer questioning whether the threat was real. They were beginning to plan how to face it. As the session broke up, General Korath approached Alex directly. Lieutenant Murphy, I would like to request that you come to the Draconian homeworld. Our warriors need to learn these new fighting methods. I'm not a teacher, Alex protested. I'm barely figuring this out myself. That, General Korath said with what might have been a smile on his reptilian features, is exactly why we need you. Walking back to his quarters that night, Alex realized that his quiet life as an academy cadet was truly over. The galaxy now knew what he was, what he had done, and what he represented. Whether he wanted it or not, he had become a symbol of humanity's unconventional approach to impossible problems. The question now was whether that would be enough to save everyone when the Void Swarm returned. 1 month after the medal ceremony that changed everything, Alex stood in the Academy's main auditorium facing an audience that represented the future of galactic defense. The space was packed with cadets from every species, their faces showing a mixture of awe and nervous excitement. He wore the uniform of a lieutenant commander now, with the Stellar Cross prominently displayed on his chest. The promotion had come with his new assignment as Special Advisor on Asymmetric Warfare Tactics, a position created specifically for him by the joint decision of the Galactic Defense Council. When I sat in seat 43A just a month ago, Alex began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's advanced acoustics. I thought I was just another student struggling with military history. I never imagined I had already helped write some of that history. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the audience. In the front row, Alex could see Lisa Grant, who had decided to change her specialty from engineering to xenopsychology after watching Alex's journey of rediscovering himself. Next to her sat Zefkol, whose request for assignment to the new Human Draconian Joint Task Force had been approved just that morning. The Void Swarm taught us something important, Alex continued. The biggest threats to our civilization might not come from where we expect them. They might not follow the rules of warfare we've spent centuries perfecting. When that happens, we need people who can think differently. Professor Veltar, sitting with the faculty, nodded approvingly. The ancient Centauri had spent the past month working with Alex to completely revise the Academy's curriculum on unconventional warfare. Their collaboration had produced a new textbook that was already being adopted by military academies across the galaxy. Today marks the beginning of a new program, Alex announced. The Asymmetric Response Initiative will train officers from all species to handle threats that don't fit our standard operational parameters. You'll learn to fight enemies that don't use conventional weapons, to lead when communication networks fail, and to find solutions when all the textbook answers have failed. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, young beings from dozens of worlds who would soon be responsible for defending galactic civilization. Some of you are here because you're the best tactical minds of your generation. Others are here because you think differently, because you ask questions that make your instructors uncomfortable. We need both kinds of officers. In the back of the auditorium, Admiral Kane and Commander Thrix observed the proceedings with satisfaction. The new program had been approved by every major government in the galaxy, with funding and resources that reflected how seriously the threat was being taken. The most important lesson from Operation Silent Shield, Alex said, using the official name for his mission against the Void Swarm, is that sometimes the fate of the galaxy depends on individuals being willing to do what seems impossible. Albur. Young crystalline cadet raised her hand, her translucent form shimmering with nervous energy. Commander Murphy, how do we prepare for enemies we don't understand? Alex smiled at the question. It was one he had been asking himself for weeks. By understanding ourselves first. Every species in this room has unique strengths and perspectives. The Draconians' warrior culture, the Centauri's analytical minds, humanity's stubborn refusal to accept defeat. These aren't just cultural differences. They're tactical advantages waiting to be used. Zephicol stood up, his golden scales gleaming under the auditorium lights. Commander, I have trained my entire life to be the perfect Draconian warrior. But what you did against the swarm was not perfect by any definition. How do we teach imperfection? The question drew murmurs of agreement from the audience. Alex had expected this. It was perhaps the hardest concept to explain to beings raised on military precision and doctrine. We teach adaptability, Alex replied. Perfect plans fail the moment they meet the enemy. Perfect warriors fall when they encounter something outside their training. What saves lives is the ability to change course when your first plan fails and your second plan fails, and you're down to desperate improvisation. He gestured to the mixed audience before him. Look around this room. 6 months ago, most of your species barely trusted each other enough for joint training exercises. Now you're sitting together, learning from each other because we've realized that our diversity is our greatest weapon against threats like the Void Swarm. Dr. Clark, who had been observing from the faculty section, raised his hand. Commander, can you tell us about your decision to reject memory conditioning for future operations? Alex nodded. This had been one of his first official decisions as an advisor. No more Black Ops units with suppressed memories. The psychological cost is too high, and we lose too much tactical knowledge when operatives can't remember their experiences. From now on, anyone who volunteers for extreme risk operations does so with full knowledge and complete memory retention. Even if the memories are traumatic, Dr. Clark pressed. Especially then, Alex replied firmly. The trauma is part of the intelligence we gain. My nightmares about the Void Swarm have taught us more about their psychology than any after-action report could have. The ceremony continued with the formal establishment of the new training program, but Alex's thoughts drifted to the larger picture. Intelligence reports from the Outer Rim suggested that scattered swarm elements were indeed regrouping, just as he had predicted. The next attack might be months away, or it might be years, but it was coming. As the formal program ended, and cadets began filing out of the auditorium, Lisa approached Alex with a smile that mixed pride and sadness. So this is really it, she said. No more study sessions, no more complaining about Professor Veltar's impossible exams. You could transfer to the new program, Alex suggested. We need people who understand both human psychology and alien thinking patterns. Lisa shook her head. My path is different now. Thanks to watching your journey, I've realized I want to understand how different species process trauma and memory. Maybe I can help the next person who goes through what you did. Zephcol joined them, his massive frame towering over both humans. Murphy, I have a confession. When I first met you, I thought humans were weak. Clever perhaps, but weak. I was wrong. We are weak in a lot of ways, Alex replied honestly. Physically, technologically, we're outmatched by most of the galaxy. But we're also stubborn enough to keep fighting when weakness should have defeated us. Yes, Zephcol agreed. That is why I requested assignment to your task force. Draconians have strength and honor, but sometimes we need to learn when not to fight honorably. As his friends departed for their new assignments, Alex found himself alone in the auditorium except for Professor Veltar, who approached with his characteristic, slow, dignified pace. "Commander Murphy," the ancient Centauri said, "I have taught military history for over a century. I have seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth of new weapons and tactics, the evolution of warfare itself. But I have never seen anything quite like what you represent." "What's that, Professor?" "The transformation of defeat into victory, through sheer refusal to accept the inevitable," Veltar replied. "It is a very human trait, but one that the entire galaxy is beginning to learn." Alex looked around the empty auditorium, thinking about all the young officers who would train here in the coming years. Some would face threats as dangerous as the Void Swarm. Some would be called upon to make the kind of desperate sacrifices that had once cost him his memory and his peace of mind. "Professor, do you think we're preparing them for what's really coming?" Veltar considered the question carefully. "No, Commander. I do not think anyone can truly prepare for the unknown. But we are teaching them to face the unknown without despair, to find solutions where none seem to exist, and to never surrender while lives can still be saved." The old professor paused, his ancient eyes twinkling with something that might have been hope. "In other words, we are teaching them to be human, in the best sense of the word. And perhaps that will be enough." Alex remained in the auditorium long, after Veltar left, thinking about the future and the challenges it would bring. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, remnants of the Void Swarm were adapting and evolving. When they returned, they would face a galaxy that had learned from humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. The unknown cadet in seat 43A was gone forever, replaced by someone who carried the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. It was a heavy burden, but Alex had learned something important from his recovered memories. Sometimes the heaviest burdens produce the strongest people. The galaxy would need that strength in the days to come.